to that screenplay for 4 months, 6 months, a year, whatever your term is with them. And you have the power to do whatever you want, as if you were the writer of that screenplay. And what I tell people, if you're a producer and you're going to option a screenplay, I'm going to give you a lot of little secrets, little tips also to keep in mind here. If you're optioning a screenplay, try and get it for $1. And the reason why you can, it's possible to get something for that low is, first of all, if it's on the bestseller list, don't bother. You won't get it for $1. But if it's somebody, a friend or a contact or somebody, and they're not in demand, there's a very good chance you can get it for $1 if you give them a good back-end deal, which means that just because you're paying them $1 doesn't mean they're not going to make money. The deal is that you give them $1 for 4 months, whatever the term that you mutually agree upon. If and when that screenplay is produced, then you agree to give them, it could be $100,000 once it's sold. So that would be a real incentive for somebody who's written something that is just sitting on a shelf, and it's better to enter into a signed contract with somebody for $1 that could, promise them $100,000 down the line. So now I reverse that also. Now, if you are a writer, try and get more than $1 for it. Okay, try and do some negotiating, because it's always nice to get as much upfront as you can, because you never know if it's going to get produced. I'm also a writer, and I've written probably at least a dozen screenplays, I would say, TV, features, and the average price that I have averaged, my screenplays have been between $6,000 and $10,000 per 3-4 month periods. I have only optioned once for $1, and nothing came of it. And usually, with somebody optioned it for $1, I don't take it as seriously, because they're usually somebody that's not as connected. If it's a studio, they're going to offer you a lot more money for it, But a lot of times, sometimes you find a story in the newspaper and you contact the person. If it's actually naming names, it's not something that's generic. Sometimes somebody haven't written a screenplay or a story, and you want to write it or hire a writer to do it, and you might say, I want to pay you $1 for the rights to your story. And you have to be very careful with rights also, because, for example, I think it was Chaplin. There's a lot of biography movies that only cover or only about the characters that the movie is about. Let's say Chaplin. It pretty much covered him and his immediate family, because otherwise you've got to get rights and releases from other members of the family, extended members. So that's why often when you see movies that are biographies or the life of whatever, it usually doesn't extend too much beyond the immediate family, because unless they've got really good insurance, if they get sued. So, okay. Any other immediate questions? Because I'm going to go over the list here. What I have up here right now is storyboards, and I'll come up to that. Does everybody here know what a storyboard is? Okay. I guess I'm used to, in LA, dealing with producers and stuff, so no question is a stupid question, because most people who are not in the business, feature films, television, a lot of this stuff could go right over their heads. So please, if anybody has a question, put your hand up, because there is no stupid question. So I may have some stupid answers, but okay. Storyboards, yeah, before I get rid of that. Storyboards are kind of like comic books, and what they are, storyboards are used quite a bit in commercials, music videos. They're used in feature films, not as much in feature films other than special effects scenes and action scenes. What storyboards help to do is they, as you can see up here on the projection here, is they sort of give you an idea of the framing of the camera, the framing of the shot, the direction that the camera is moving or the character is moving. It's often, like I said, used for special effects or action scenes where it might take more time to actually get on the set and go, okay, now how are we going to shoot this? So it's sort of forming the pictures in your head before you go and shoot, and then you can actually pass these out to the immediate crew people, the cameraman, the assistant director, production people, so that they have an idea of what's going on, so there's no questions. And they can be very crude drawings. They can be stick characters. They can be circles. They can even be, this is actually from a program called, I think it's called Storyboard Plus, and I think it was through Samuel French. I'm going to give some addresses later of some bookstores, mail order bookstores in LA that you can pretty much get any book that you need on filmmaking, whether it's commercials or music videos or documentaries or industrials. So anyway, so that's just sort of a brief intro on what storyboards are. And they, again, like I said, they're not really necessary, but if you've got some time, and it's kind of like what Hitchcock used to say. He used to say that his movie was finished before he actually shot it, because he actually formulated, he storyboarded most of his shots, and he had all his script notes and everything in his head or on paper, so that when he went in, he said the easiest thing was shooting it. It was just all the planning that was the hard work. Okay, now, let's, so don't get too overwhelmed, let's do this. Thanks. Okay, can everybody see this okay? Okay, let's see, we'll start with pre-production. Everybody see this okay? Yes? Probably write it, yeah, you may have to do your notes, because they didn't give me Xeroxes, so yeah, probably take that down. Yeah, there, as far as I know, there aren't any handouts here. Now, if anybody's real concerned, I also have some seminar tapes. If anybody has any questions, I've got a few flyers here. This is based on a actually 3 or 4 day course that I've taught over the last few years. There's probably about 20 hours of instruction in it, and it covers all the detail. It's based on what I'm covering today, but it goes into a lot more detail and things, okay? So if anybody's real concerned and they want to get a hold of the tapes, just talk to me afterwards. Okay. I don't want to be in anybody's way here. Not in the... We okay? Okay. This is called pre-production. Pre-production is everything before the main production. Okay, so that makes sense, pre-production. Script, as I mentioned, finding the script and the options, advances, development, novel, adaptation, and right genres. Finding the script, like I said, can be anywhere from a story in the newspaper to somebody who's written a screenplay that you want to option. You can advertise for them in the newspaper, in any trade magazines. You could write it yourself. It could be based on an idea that you have. You might hire a writer. Advances, that is pretty much the word for if you hire someone to write something, you want to give them an advance. You want to give them $1,000 or $100 or whatever to start writing something for you. Development, in the studio terms, development is usually when they're developing a script, that they're having several writers work on it, the production executives are meeting on the script, etc. Novel adaptation and rights, that's pretty much, I think, self-explanatory. That's if you find a novel that you think would make a good movie, then you have to option the rights to that, which could be very expensive if it's a major publisher. But sometimes you can find some obscure book, old book in an older bookstore, a bookstore that has older collections. And then genres, that pretty much just covers, what kind of screenplay is it? Is it a sci-fi? Is it a romance? Is it a comedy? Is it a western? One of the things I recommend too is, especially if it's a first project, to try and keep away from the special genres like sci-fi or westerns or period pieces, because those are very expensive to do, and as soon as people see those, it kind of says dollars. Okay, so the best thing is the contemporary type, the modern day, something that happens today or something that can be done without some major costumes and effects. I mean, you might be able to do a western if it's a very basic script that just has a horse and a cowboy and one cowboy hat or something. So, okay. Writing the screenplay, the secrets of writing. Since there aren't really any writers in here, except for this. Yes, there are some writers? Okay, I'm going to come back to that then, so remind me, because there's some notes I want to go over on that. Okay, recommended writing books. I will recommend, actually, my favorite book is a book called How to Write a Movie in 21 Days. This one is by Vicki King, K-I-N-G. And you pretty much can, I think you can get that in any bookstore. If you have a problem, I will give you the address to Samuel French bookstores in Los Angeles. They have 2 stores there, and they have mail order. And they pretty much have every book available that's ever been written regarding filmmaking. But that's one of my favorites. Sid Field also has a book. I don't remember the name offhand. Oh, you don't like Sid's book? How about Lajus Igri? Do you like his book? Okay, you should check his book out. You'll like his book. And I'll have a list of some more books, some more writing books as well. There was a question earlier about some programs, computer programs for writing. There's a program called Scripter. This is through Screenplay Systems out of Los Angeles, and I'm sure there are companies here in San Diego that you can order them from or buy them direct from. Scripter is more of a formatting for screenplays, and the formatting is, you know, where to indent the paragraphs, the sentences, where the character's dialogue begins, et cetera, et cetera. And it doesn't have to be, I mean, I've had people that actually will pick up a script from a, you know, they'll buy a script from a bookstore or something, and you don't even, if your script goes to the studio or goes to somebody and it's off by maybe 3 or 4 indentations or, you know, spaces, don't worry about it. As long as it looks like a script, that's the main thing. Is when your script goes into a studio or to a producer, they just want it to look like it. They're not going to take out their ruler and measure it and go, okay, this guy's off by 2 spaces. I'm not going to do a script. So the main thing is that it's neat and that it follows the format to at least look like a screenplay. And there's lots of books that you can get on that, and it's pretty standard, so it shouldn't vary from book to book. Okay.
That's called Scripter?
Yes, Scripter. There's another program called Dramatica, which is sort of a formulation type program, and it's supposed to help you write. It's supposed to sort of be your writing engine. Now, I've tried it, and I think it's more complicated to write with it than it is to write without. And I'll get into, when we go back to some of the secrets of writing, I'll talk about index cards and what I call nonlinear writing. Okay, and if I'm talking about that and I fail to mention that, please, you know, put up your hand or scream at me or whatever. Okay. Also, too, if you guys want to remind me, we'll probably take like a 5 to 8 minute break around 7:40, if that's good for everybody. You know, and then come back because we wrap at 9:30, and I want to keep everybody on schedule here and cover as much as I can. Okay. And if I talk too fast, let me know. But to cover this, I think I have to. Okay. Okay, screenplay rights and points, writing the contracts, ancillary rights, sequels, and merchandising. This mainly is when you negotiate for a screenplay, whether it's your screenplay as a producer that you've gotten the rights to, or you've written it, you want to be able to have some back-end action with the screenplay. You want some points, and the points could be 5 points or 10 points. And what I mean by points is that, you know, let's say the film grosses, let's say it's a low-budget film and it's $100,000. If you've got 10 points, that could be $10,000 for you, in addition to what you've been paid. So always try and get some points, you know, with your screenplay rights. They're usually screenplay rights, screenplay points. They could be part of the producer's. It can get pretty complicated, though. It can be part of the producer's points. It can be part of the company points. So that's what you have to. Usually, you're working with an attorney at that point. But what you can do is you can ask the attorney that, and usually they know to do that. The sequels and merchandising, you also want to put in your contract, or make sure that the attorney puts in your contract that if there's a series based on your movie, for example, TV series, that you will get some rights to that, you know, every time the show is on. For example, Starman was a TV series for a while after the feature film with Robert Hayes, and the writers and the producers had a sequels clause in their contract, so every time the show ran, they had rights, you know, they got some payments from that, some royalties. And then merchandising, for example, Star Wars is a perfect example of merchandising. If you write a film that has some possible merchandising spin-offs, you know, like Disney is you just follow any of Disney films, The Hunchback, Pocahontas, they take full advantage of that with McDonald's, with Burger King, with Mattel. So you want to put all that in your contracts. Okay, finding financing. That's a pretty, I guess, yeah, that's a good one. It can be a pretty ambiguous line there too. There's different types of financing. There are investors, there's loans, there's guarantees, there's pre-sales, and there's talent-driven. Now, what I'm talking about is anybody in this class, after taking this class, will have enough knowledge to produce their own independent feature film or a small project, whether it be a commercial or an industrial, etc. What I am going to relay to everybody here is that the information I'm giving you, if you had $100,000 to $200,000, actually, let's start at $60,000. If you had $60,000 to $200,000, you could do an independent, low-budget film that could be fairly commercial and could make your investors back 5 to 10 times that money. I've done it with my independent films. What I'll do is later I'll pass out, or at the break if you guys want to take a look. These are 3 independent films that I've done. This is one called Turn of the Blade, which had no names in it. And since then, this young lady went on to be in Baywatch. She's done a couple of low-budget features. She's done some commercials. But this film was done for under $100,000, and my investors have made back probably about $600,000 on it already. It was shot in 10 days, very small crew, and it's being released in Canada on home video. This is the advertisement for that. It should be out in the States here shortly as well. It's a little bit harder to get the sales in the States if there are no big names in a film. That was shot on 35 millimeter. Independent low-budget films can also be shot on 16 millimeter. 16 is pretty much the standard for low-budget films. I'm sure you've heard of Super 8, 16 millimeter, 35. Most studio features are shot on 35, but 35 is probably about 50 to 60% more expensive than 16. 16 is adequate, or I'd say is pretty good if you're doing a low-budget feature and you're transferring to videotape. And when I say that, most independent features don't go into the theaters because they don't have big names. It costs a lot to go into the theaters. But there's a very good chance to go on video because the market for video is huge. And I will talk soon about foreign distribution.
Super 16?
Super 16 is not bad. Now, Leaving Las Vegas was shot in Super 16. The difference between 16 and Super 16 is it's the same film stock, but the aperture size on the in the camera is larger. So what it's doing is it's giving you, see if I have an example, it's giving you a little bit larger frame. So in other words, no. Let's say this was 35 millimeter, this size here. This would be 16, and then in the middle there'd be a little bit larger. So what Super 16 is doing is it's going on the same film stock as the 16, but it's a little bit larger. But you need a special camera that's been fitted for Super 16, which they are available. And then when you transfer it, and the picture is a little bit better because it's a little bit less grain. But some of the film stock they're coming up with now for 16 is pretty amazing. There's a lot of shows. Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, that's shot on 16 millimeter. So, and I think Texas Ranger, Walker Texas Ranger is shot on 16 also. So if they can do it on 16, you guys can do it on 16, and it's not that expensive.
We're talking about financing. Is
Yeah.
there a periodical, like an all periodical that you can like put in for people like investors that want to invest? Trade magazines?
Not that I'm really aware of. I mean, I think there are probably some magazines that you can put some ads in, but I think it's sort of a touchy subject when you're advertising for money. I don't know what the legalities are behind that. Now, there is a book that is how to find money for your films, and I know that they have that at Samuel French, and that deals with, it gives you addresses to grants, a lot of government grants, for example. It doesn't deal necessarily with actual investors that are just out there looking for investment.
It's not a trade magazine?
I'm not aware. Well, there are trade magazines just for investors, period, I'm sure, but I haven't really dealt on that end. So that's something I haven't really done a lot of research on. But now, what about the internet? Is anybody on the internet here? I think there's probably something on there that investors actually look up, certain opportunities on the internet. Yes? Yeah.
Well, not the internet, but I've heard a lot about limited partnerships.
Right.
And people starting those and stuff like that. I was kind of wondering if you had like where do you start? Or you have an idea, you have a screen.
Right, right.
Like that. Where do you look for an investor and stuff like that?
Okay, if you're doing a low budget film, I would say, like I said, between $60,000 and $200,000. Very first place you look is friends and relatives. Very first place, seriously. And I know people who have funded their films through family, and it could be through through parents, through brother, sister, through aunts, through uncles, inheritances. People have done films. Credit cards are another one. If you've got a good, credit limit. Robert Townsend. Was it Robert Townsend? Robert Townsend. Yeah, that did. What was it? Hollywood Shuffle. He did that all on his credit cards. I know a few producers actually that I've worked with in Los Angeles who have done it on their credit cards. But you can actually make, $60,000 may sound like a lot, but for a film, it's not that hard to find, especially if you can convince your potential investors that they can recoup their money. Unless it's a really bad film, it'd be really hard to not make that money, to at least make the 60 or at least get half of that back.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I'll get into that. That's going to be with the distribution, and I will get into that. If we start running, getting close, we'll, I'll cut in and talk some more about that quickly. Okay, so I may jump back a little bit to the financing when I talk about the distribution. Guarantees, loans is pretty much self-explanatory. Loans are just going to the bank and, getting a loan, putting up your car or your house or your wife or your husband or somebody just to get that money. Guarantees, that wouldn't really apply here, I don't think. I think you need, I probably have to go into too much detail on that. You need to have sort of a bigger project with some names attached to it. That sort of falls into where pre-sales are also. Pre-sales is, for example, let's say I had Leslie Nielsen attached to a film of mine. I could go around to investors, to studios, to independent producers and say, okay, I've got Leslie Nielsen. This film is going to sell because Leslie Nielsen's in it, and it's a comedy. So based on that, they might say, okay, we're going to give you $100,000 here. Someone over here is going to give me $500,000, et cetera, et cetera. So pre-sales are only really work when you have something attached to the project before it starts. Okay, and that also goes into talent-driven. That's, for example, if I had Leslie Nielsen, then that means the project is talent-driven. If I have a famous cameraman, that's talent-driven. Okay, the budget above and below the line. Okay, anybody here know what above and below the line means? Okay, it's pretty straightforward. Once I explain it, you'll probably never forget it. Okay, above the line is usually, above the line can change. It can vary hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars. Okay, below the line usually doesn't change. Okay, below the line is usually your crew, your equipment, your locations, and your staff, et cetera, et cetera. It's all the stuff that you go and you negotiate deals with companies and you make your film. Above the line are things like the actors, the director, and the producers, and the screenplay. Those, like I said, can vary. I mean, if you've got Sylvester Stallone, okay, let's say we've got a $100,000 movie below the line, okay? And let's say it's a $100,000 movie below the line. No, this wouldn't happen, but this is an exaggerated example. $100,000 below the line for the camera equipment, for the locations, it's film stock, but you've got Sylvester Stallone. Well, Stallone wants $30 million, so your movie's going to be $30 million and $100,000, okay? Which is kind of ridiculous. So, and depending on the writer, if the writer, let's say the writer of Joe Esterhaus, okay, he's going to charge at least $1 million or $2 million for his screenplays. Graham Yost, who wrote Speed and Broken Arrow, he's going to get quite a bit of money. As a matter of fact, Graham, he actually wrote the story for Speed, did not write the screenplay, but because of his clout writing the story, he then went on to write Broken Arrow, and he's been getting a lot of money for that, for his writing services. So again, above the line can change quite a bit with your budget. Below the line pretty much stays the same. It's pretty standard. So if somebody says to you, what's above the line, that's really what they want to know. They're not as concerned about below the line. Unless it's, if it's a science fiction film or a period piece, it's going to change a little bit, but there's not going to be anything below the line that someone's going to demand, $1 million or $10 million or whatever. Okay, low budget versus high budget. We're talking anything, well, if you're talking with the studios, anything under 10 million is low budget to them. The average studio budget right now is probably 35 to 40 million. Most studio films right now, most of the summer films that are coming out right now, like Twister and Mission Impossible, those are between 60 and 80 million dollars, which is just, it's just kind of ridiculous to even think about it, just mind-boggling. There's no creativity left for them. I mean, you pay for everything, and it's like no negotiating or anything. How much for that van? $1 million. Okay. No, that's below the line, so they can't do that. Okay. Now, low budget versus high budget. Now, deferments. When you're doing a low budget film, it's hard to pay people, what they're really worth. With the studio picture, people can get paid anywhere from $300 to $600 a day, and that's below the line. These are just assistants, camera people, etc. But if you're doing a low-budget film, and this is possible too, because I've had some very good people work on my low-budget films that have been on pictures like Back to the Future or Total Recall or Jaws. And what deferments means is that you pay them, let's say you can only afford to pay them $60 a day or $100 a day. You defer them what you think they're worth. So in other words, if you pay them $100 a day instead of $400 a day, defer them $300. Now, you only have to pay them that $300 if and when the film makes money. If it doesn't make any money, then you don't have to pay them, and they worked and they took a chance.
Can a music video make money? Can you do a deployment on a music video?
Music videos are a tough sell because usually, as far as I know, unless they're put on videotape and sold, there usually is not a market for that. I did a music video for a group called Britannia, and I had Jessica Hahn play the judge in it, and it had helicopters and police cars and the whole thing. It was a big production. I mean, it was budgeted at about $150,000. We did it for about $12 grand total, and we never sold it. But we had MTV ran it a couple times. MTV Europe ran it. The Playboy Channel ran it because Jessica Hahn was in it. But we didn't really make any money on it. And it wasn't really the intention to do that. It was mainly as a promotion for the band. But the band got a lot of work, and they signed a record deal. So that was sort of that was the accomplishment that we got from that.
I'm just trying to figure out an angle.
Well, you can do well, it's hard to say deferments with music videos because then they'll say, well, where are you going to get your money? What you can say is that if we sell it, we'll pay you. But and if they think you're going to sell it, great. But tell them you don't know if you can sell it. If it's a really great music video, maybe people will buy it on video. But it depends if it's. If it's Alanis Morissette, you can get it in the video stores and people will buy it. So usually it's a compilation of music videos. If it's like the Cars, for example, they'll put out like a half hour or a 40-minute tape that's got all their music videos on it, and people will buy that or rent that. So that's the other way, is to make it in distribution. So that's possible. Okay, and then points. That's something that I try to keep away from. Points is sort of another way of deferring people, and that is kind of like when I was talking with the writers, when you defer the writers. Or when you give the writers points, is instead of paying somebody, $500 a day, you pay them maybe $500 for the entire shoot, whether it be a week or 2 weeks, but you promise them 1 or 2 points in the film. So that means if they've got 1 or 2 points meaning percentage, let's say they have 1%, and the actor can rehearse them and put them on tape for you. It can be very basic. It can be as simple as having a video camera set up. Technically it doesn't have to be good, but it gives you an idea of the actor's presence on tape. So we had Victoria do that, and she FedExed the tape to us, and I think it was 3 days after that we flew her up to Canada, and she had the role in the film. So, and She was paid, I think it was Canadian Union, and we'll talk a little bit about the union stuff. It was probably about $2,500 for the time. We shot the film in 10 days, so it wasn't a lot. And Dan Aykroyd is the voice of the computer in the film. We couldn't afford Dan on camera because it was too expensive for his time, but I've known Dan for a few years, fellow Canadian. I'm also Canadian. And an hour of his time recorded all his dialogue for the computer and then threw it throughout the film, and he probably has 25 minutes of dialogue in the film. Dan sort of did it, he did it for scale, so it was sort of as a favor. I've known him for like 10 years, so if you have any celebrity friends, like famous friends, keep them as friends and like take them out to dinner a lot, and then one day ask them if they'll be in your movie. And then that'll give you some power to get it done. Also, too, Andrew Divoff was in this film. Does anybody know who Andrew Divoff is? Anybody see the movie A Low Down Dirty Shame? He was the bad guy in that. Yeah, and he also had a small part in Hunt for Red October. And then Dennis Hayden was one of the bad guys in the first Die Hard. And then William Richard. Anybody seen the movie My Own Private Idaho? William Richard it was with Keanu Reeves in River Phoenix. And William was he sort of played this Shakespearean character. And so he was in the film as well. Okay, I want to get off track here. If I forget something, please stop me because there's so much to say here and I want to make sure I cover as much as I can. So that pretty much covers it with how to find actors. Okay, and you may have some friends or you may want to do some acting too. And like, with Brothers McMullen. Now, was he a professional actor at the time? He hadn't really done anything, did he? He just made his own film, starred in it, now he's famous.
Well, the story I got, when I was in New York City, I passed by a dry cleaners, and they had the poster for the movie prominently displayed. I asked them why. One of the guys who worked in the dry cleaners.
Oh, funny. That's funny.
Like the oldest brother.
That's funny. There's another movie out called Clerks, too. And that was, okay, you know what? That's actually not a bad movie to rent. Clerks was shot for $25,000 in black and white. Now, it almost looks like it, but it was so well written, it just shows you that technically it doesn't have to be that great if it's well written, because the society right now is really into the avant-garde. Pulp Fiction was not mainstream when it came out. Now everybody's trying to do Pulp Fiction. Another one is El Mariachi. That movie was originally shot for $7,000, color. Rodriguez shot it. He has a book out called Rebel Without a Crew. And he actually put himself into a special hospital where they test you for all different things. It's like drug testing. And I think he got the financing. I think he got $10,000 to have them inject him with all kinds of things and for a month under observation. And that's how he made his movie. Now, it's a little bit misleading when you see it, if you rent it, because Warner Brothers, I think it was Warner Brothers, was it Columbia? They pumped about at least another $60,000 to $100,000 in the soundtrack. But the picture is definitely a $7,000 movie, and his cutting is excellent. And then he went on to do, was it El Desperado? Or Desperado?
That's Clerks?
No, Clerks was the one for $25,000. El Mariachi is the other one. El Mariachi is definitely worth renting, and Clerks, if you want to see what can be done low budget. It's very encouraging. It's very encouraging.
And when did they shoot El Mariachi?
That was shot in 16 also. Both shot in 16. Okay. All right, crew, that's pretty much, that's pretty much your crew. That's your cameraman, your director's not really part of the crew, but I guess to just, I'll sort of give you, right now we'll include the director as the crew, because a director would be like above the line with an actor, for example. But in a sense, he really is part of the hiring. So you've got, let's say, your producer, your director, your cameraman, you've got several assistant cameramen. If anybody wants to go into detail with camera, we can do that a little bit later, because that could be a whole other seminar right there. But you could have a basic crew of anywhere from 3 to 10 people. My average crew has been, I would say, about 15 people. Okay, but I could do it for about 7 or 8 people. Now, Rodriguez, he was his crew. He was the cameraman. He was his assistant cameraman. He was the sound man. He was everything. And I think he even had his actors, if he did need crew, he had his actors, pull some lights and stuff like that as well. So you could virtually do it yourself, but I would say minimum 3 to 4 people. Okay. Locations, pretty much, whatever the locations are to your script. Now, the thing with locations, though, is if you've got equipment and you've got a crew and actors, normally you need what's called permits. You need permission, legal permission to shoot somewhere, especially if it's on public property. Now, if you're shooting in your house or a friend's backyard, you don't have to worry about it. But if you're shooting in a public place and you're bringing in lights and cameras, then you've got to negotiate some kind of deal with them. They may want you to have insurance, some liability in case somebody's hurt. So that's something you have to look into too. If you write a low-budget film, try and write it based on using your house or a friend's house or a friend's business. I often tell people, and this is what I've done, actually my first feature film, I looked at all the things that I had access to. I had access to a helicopter, I had access to an airport, a couple of homes, an apartment, a studio, and a theater. And I said, okay, I'm going to write a movie based on those locations. Because locations can be very expensive. One reason why I shot The Random Factor up in Canada was because my hometown is Ottawa, Ontario, and it's a small town, everybody knows me up there. There was about 15 or 16 locations. I got all the locations for free. And one of the main locations was a hospital. And I couldn't get that in Los Angeles without paying a fortune for it. So that was my main impetus for going up to Canada. I saved myself probably $50,000 to $100,000 in location fees. So look at what you have too. If it takes place in an elevator, find a friend who owns a building with an elevator, and there you go. Also too, the fewer locations you have, the better for a low-budget film, because every time you have a new location, you've got to move to that location, and that takes time. That's your company time. Everybody's got to pack up the equipment, get in their cars, go to the next location. Some people get lost. You wait for them to show up, etc. So if you only have 1 or 2 locations, you can get more done, and it's more of a feeling of you set up camp and you don't have to keep moving around. So my film Turn of the Blade actually had 3 locations in the entire film, and what I did was I did a lot of cutting back and forth, so it looked like we kept going, that there were more scenes than there actually were, or more locations. That's the other thing too, is when you're shooting, you shoot out of continuity. Now if you read a script, it can go from the guy's house to his office, back to his house, then to the airport, then back to his house, then to his office. Everything, when the script is broken down, everything that takes place in his office, for example, you shoot all the office stuff at the same time. So you go through your assistant director, that's his job, to go through the script and to make notations where everything that is, I have an example here, everything that is shot, okay, for example, let me just take this off where it, I don't want to lose the spot here. Okay, where are we here? Okay, pre-production. Okay, this is an example here of, this is a breakdown of one of the scripts. If you'll notice, the dark room, we shoot all the dark room scenes together, but they're all different times throughout the film. Okay, same thing with the exterior phone, backyard day, backyard morning, backyard evening, night. It's got the scene numbers, the cast members, cast members here, costumes, and then the props. This is just an example of a breakdown of a script that tells you a little bit about what's happening, so that when people look at it, they know what the scene is about. The actors know, the director knows, the assistant director knows. Tells you that there's 7 pages that day. This is just shooting of one day here. Okay? So, and once we shoot everything in the dark room, we're wrapped and we're out of there. Then we go to the payphone, we're wrapped and we're out of there. We go to the backyard, we're wrapped and we're out of there. Okay? And so the most important thing too with continuity, and that's why you have a script supervisor or a continuity person, they're the ones who tell the actors when to change their wardrobe. Because if you've got all the scenes happening, you're shooting them all at once, they may be over a period of time. It might be over 3 days. Well, the actor can't be wearing the same thing the whole time, unless it's a doctor or something like that. So you're gonna have wardrobe changes, and that's all notated with the script supervisor. Okay. So let me go back to this. How are we doing? Okay, we're gonna probably take a break shortly here. Let's get through pre-production here. Okay, storyboards. I showed you a little bit of the storyboards when you first came in. And again, that's not mandatory, and it just sort of helps a little bit of your planning. Some people think more in visuals. That's usually mainly more for the director and the cameraman to work on. Okay.
As far as the storyboard,
Yes.
is there like
Bless you.
like any kind of organization that, because I've done it for student films.
Okay.
And but, like if you wanted to say, use that as a way of getting your foot in the door, where would you go?
Now, you're saying like as an example of your artwork, or to help sell the project?
Well, to do both.
Okay. Well, storyboard. I mean, if you're going to investors, for example, and they want to see something visual, you can show them the storyboards. Storyboards help more to sell for commercials, for products. Now, if you're doing, let's say, an industrial, it may not hurt if you feel it's a very visual piece. But often a script, will do that job. Now, if you're an artist, you might be able to sell yourself to companies that are looking for storyboard artists. And as I mentioned, there's a computer program out called Storyboard Plus, I think it's called. But Samuel French would know, or any of the, it's probably, you could probably find it in one of the bookstores as well. So, did that answer your question?
Well, I mean, I was wondering if there was something similar to like, not necessarily a guild, but that like, say, if you've done storyboard work.
There are agents that represent storyboard artists. I know in Los Angeles there are, and I'm sure there are some here as well. That would probably have to pick up. There's I think there's a cartooning magazine or a caricature magazine you could pick up that might have something on that. There's a lot of artists' organizations that you can call. Might even start with unions and find out. I'm sure there's an artists' guild or an artists' union that covers cartoonists. Okay. Okay, rehearsals. Rehearsals are pretty much just rehearsing the script with your actors. This can be anything from sitting around a conference table, very formal setting in a sense, and reading the script, or it can be actually acting, standing and acting out the script. It can be the director just working with one or two of the actors for each individual scenes, or it could just be the actors themselves, rehearsing on their own. Blocking is it's going through with the actors what their action is going to be for the scene. For example, theater. If you go to a play, to explain blocking in a play, it would be the actor says, okay, or the director says, okay, I want the actor, I'm going to block him, he's going to start here, he's going to walk over to the couch, he's going to sit down, the other actor's going to walk up and go over here. That's pretty much blocking. That's pretty much the actions and directions of the actors. It doesn't really deal with their emoting or their actual acting abilities. It's more technical, but obviously adds to the pacing of the film and makes it more interesting. If you have a movie and two characters are sitting, well, for example, Diner, they're sitting at at the table talking. There's no blocking for that movie at all. No, I think the waitress comes back and forth, and that's about it. Or the majority of it. So, and blocking is just something that comes with motivation from the director and the actor. Okay, wardrobe. Talked a little bit about wardrobe. You have a wardrobe person, and let's say the script is broken down to take place over a period of 10 days. Then chances are you're going to have at least 10 wardrobe changes, unless the actor changes into their pajamas in one scene at night, etc. And the clothing is usually numbered per day with tabs. It's completely a waste of time and money to buy wardrobe for an actor in a low-budget film when it's a contemporary piece, because their own clothes are going to fit them, and unless they're playing a character that they're not normally, playing. I mean, if you need a doctor's outfit or if you need a some kind of a, a fireman's outfit or a police outfit, that's different. Then you go to a costume place. But otherwise, if they have their own suits, their own dresses, etc., then you have them bring in what they have. If they don't have it, then you go out and purchase it. Okay, what you have to be careful with, though, is one of my films, my wardrobe lady lost like half the wardrobe, so I had to that cost me more than buying this stuff. I had to compensate everybody for lost wardrobe. But your insurance will usually handle that or take care of that if you have insurance, and we will talk about that also. Production design, you really won't have production design in a low-budget film. Production design is something like, for example, Mission Impossible, the kind of look that they wanted the film to have. It has to do with everything from the style of the camera work that the director of photography does, which is, could be also your cameraman, to the type of artwork that's in the film. Batman, for example, is a perfect example of production design. The design of Gotham City, the design of the car, the design of Batman's suit. So the production designer works with the wardrobe person for the look of the outfits, works with the art director who puts the props and things on the set, and works with anything that is up there on the screen that is going to give the film that kind of look. Production designer in a period piece would design the overall look of the entire film as far as, if it took place in the 1950s. It would be their job to make sure it's believable that it took place in the 1950s. And the cameraman may work with the production designer to decide what kind of lenses and filters go on the camera to maybe give it a little bit more of a sepia look to it, so it's believable that it was done, years back. Production boards, I'll show an example of this. This is something that looks more complicated than it actually is. There are programs that do this. There's something called scheduling. It's pretty simple. This could actually even be done on index cards as well. All this is it's breaking down each day. Each one is considered a strip, and these strips were done on a computer, but there's also a kit where they're almost like, well, they're actually almost about that size, and then you can move the strips around and decide what you're going to shoot each day. It's almost like you've got all these chores to do, and you write them down on index cards, but you're not sure what order to do them in, and you can mix them around and decide, okay, this card goes here, this card goes here. And I'll talk a little bit more about that with nonlinear writing as well. So this just helps to organize. What I did was I just took all the things that said Sam and Kelly's house, exterior, and put them together. There was only one Jeep in the driveway, so I went ahead and just put that by itself outside the house and then back to their house in the backyard. So I put as many things together as possible. You can see up at the top the alley, all the alleys are together, all the Jeep stuff is together. So that just helps you, and then the black just shows you, the end of the day, whose house you're shooting at, how many pages, etc. That just helps you to sort of organize it more. And there are books on this, and you probably need a book to sort of read about it, to learn about it, if you were going to do it the way that a studio does it. But it can be simplified very easily. It's just a matter of taking your locations and everything and organizing them. This is just one way that Hollywood does it. Okay, and there are books on that, and they're called production strips or production boards. Okay, back to here, and then we'll take a few-minute break. Okay, technical considerations. Okay, camera, film stock lab. We talked a little bit about film stock earlier, 16 and 35. Doing a low-budget film, especially if it's going to be going to video and television, 16 is fine for that. It's only when it goes in the theater that you should consider 35 because it's being projected large and it gets real grainy. Now, 16 millimeter films, if they get a distributor and if they do end up going theatrical, you can blow up 16 millimeter film to 35. Okay, it won't look as good as if you shot it on 35, but I believe Mariachi, they did that with Mariachi El Mariachi for a limited theatrical release, and they did do that for Leaving Las Vegas.
What is that?
El Mariachi, the actual film can be blown up to 35. It's almost like if you took a 110 snapshot with your still camera and you wanted to make a 35 millimeter print of it. So it just goes to the lab and they blow it up. They blow it, to that size. It's just called blowing up. You want to blow it up. You want to enlarge it or blow it up. Yes.
Would you ever film directly on, say, a high 8 video if you knew it was going directly to video?
Actually, that's a very good question. Yes and no. If you shoot video, it's going to look video. Video is the look of, like, game shows, the news, etc. Now, you can shoot video, and there are different techniques for making it look like film. There's things called film technique or film. I don't know if there's anything here in San Diego. You could probably make some calls and find out. There's some places in LA. There might be some independent film magazines. There's Independent Filmmaker and Filmmaker magazine that may have some ads for that. And that might be costly, though. I don't know what the price is on that. And it won't look as good as film, but it won't look like typical video either.
All right, one thing that I've seen is there have been at least 2 documentaries I know of that were originally shot on high 8.
Right,
And then they were released theatrically.
right.
And it looked exactly like a video, but people were willing to put up with
Right.
the low image quality because
Because of the subject matter?
It was so compelling.
Right.
One was Jupiter's Wife and the other one was Hoop Dreams.
Okay, that's right. Yeah, Hoop Dreams. I forgot about that. Yeah. Now, there's also, what's interesting, there's some new digital cameras out right now. And the digital cameras, I've actually been tempted to do that, and I may do an experiment with that. Now, these are you can buy these at the Good Guys. They're about $3,000. There's 2 different types. There's one equivalent to a 1-chip and a 3-chip. Now, what that means is that the 3-chip camera is more of a broadcast quality. So if you want to do, now the 1-chip would be adequate, but the 3-chip would be better. The 1-chip is a lot cheaper. I think it's about $1,000 cheaper.
What would it be comparable to?
The 3-chip digital camera would be comparable to a Beta SP camera. In other words, it would be comparable to what you see on the news, okay, the stories that are done on the news. And you could actually shoot a feature on that. Now, that is actually excellent for industrials. And Steve, you were looking at industrials, right? Either Beta SP or these new digital camcorders would be excellent for industrials. Industrials do not have to be shot on film.
Music videos.
Music videos can, because they can be so artsy and so, different style, they can be shot Super 8, they can be shot video, they can be shot all kinds of stuff. And there are processes where you can run it through and get different looks on it. Yeah.
Is there any particular brand of digital cameras?
Well, Sony and Panasonic are the main ones I know right now. I think Sharp is coming out with one if they haven't already. Sony is a great brand, and Panasonic is great. It's just a matter of the kind of what kind of functions you need on the camera. Now I think they both have like a steady cam type system on it, which means the lens has a stabilizer, so it floats. In other words, when you're holding a camera and people say, oh, you couldn't hold the camera straight. Well, this has, in big feature films, they have what's called a steady cam. And I don't know if you've seen pictures of a guy standing there, behind the scenes, and he's got the camera, and it looks like the camera is almost floating as he walks. And they do that for a lot of scenes where the actors are walking upstairs, or they go into an elevator. And the Steadicam makes it look like the camera was actually on a tripod, on wheels, on a dolly, and very, very steady. Now, these home cameras have a stabilizer in it, so as long as you don't shake the camera like this, and you just go like this, it's going to be very, very smooth. And it's going to give you a very professional look to your... In the digital cameras, they have them. Yeah, they already come with that. They're so sophisticated.
There's also the Steadicam Junior.
The Steadicam Junior is, it's almost passe now because of these video cameras that have the stabilizer in them. The Steadicam Junior there's one for VHS, Super VHS, and then one for the smaller cameras. And that's just a unit that if your home camera, video camera, does not have a stabilizer, you can screw it onto it, and it's got sort of like it's kind of like, I don't know how to describe it. It floats it. It just floats the camera a little bit. It's almost like it's on water, the way that the camera is. So what it does is it smooths out any jerky movements, is what it does. Okay. Film stock camera. Again, okay, so we're talking a bit about camera. Then there's different kinds of film cameras, the 16 and the 35. And then the labs. I don't know what labs are here in San Diego, but most labs, I would think here in San Diego especially, would do at least 16 and possibly 35. If not, your closest labs are, good labs are Los Angeles. Okay. Product placement, very quickly. Okay, do you want me to finish this real quick and then we'll take a break? Is that good? Okay. Product placement, very simply, that's again, McDonald's is a perfect example. You go to Burger King and you get a Hunchback of Notre Dame cup with your Coke. Toy Story was great for product placement. You go in any toy store, you can get Buzz Lightyear and Woody and all that stuff. And these are just deals that are done between all the restaurants and the toy companies.
Do they have agents to handle that stuff?
Usually they do, yeah. Usually it's done through. Now I was in Steven Spielberg's office about 10 years ago, and there were people sitting in his office with samples of like lunch boxes and cups, mugs with pictures of E.T. on them, and they were going in directly to meet with Spielberg because he's one of the few producers that actually has a say in everything he does. Like, really, I don't know if he does it as much now, but 10 years ago, he wanted to see every product personally. So there was a sample of a lunchbox with E.T., and the guy was waiting to go in to see Spielberg. And, if he okayed it, okay, they had it, and then they had a licensing deal with them. And so obviously the company makes money off of that. So, and Warner Brothers with all their cartoon characters, you can get ties, you can get magnets, you can get clocks, all kinds of stuff. And what happens is the companies make them, but then, or the manufacturers make them, and then the studios get a royalty on that.
How do you find an agent that will do that?
That's a good question. I haven't worked with an agent on that before, but that's probably something.
There must be people who do it.
Yeah, but that's something I haven't really worked with as far as I haven't made a film where I've actually had product extended to that.
What you were talking about just now is merchandising. But product placement, as I understand it, is getting...
Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped ahead of myself. Thank you for that. Okay. Thank you. Okay. I'm getting confused here. Yes. Product placement, I'm sorry. We back up a little bit. You're working with the companies that their product is seen in the film. Okay, what I was talking about again was the sequel, what happens afterwards when people want to make some money off your film. Thank you. Product placement is when you see a film, for example, perfect example is Mission Impossible. Okay, has everybody seen the commercials for Macintosh for the PowerBook? It says pick up the book today. Okay. Tom Cruise has been using, he uses the PowerBook. His character uses it quite a bit in the film. Apple sponsored that. Obviously, they gave them a free PowerBook, maybe several of them, and then they're working with them to do, doing the commercials and advertising the PowerBook and advertising the movie. Coca-Cola. Whenever you see a product in a film that is, that you can read their label, you can guarantee that that company has done product placement. Now, product placement can mean anything from, let's say you see someone holding a Coca-Cola. The character is drinking a Coca-Cola. Okay, Stallone is drinking a Coca-Cola. Either Coke has donated free Coca-Cola to the cast and crew as much as they want for the duration of the shoot, or they've also invested in the film or donated money to the shoot as well.
I remember when you were talking about that, I was thinking about in the film E.T., they were supposed to use M&M's.
Right.
M&M's refused to be in the film.
Right.
So they used Reese's Pieces.
That's right. And to this day, they're still kicking themselves in the butt. That's right, because Reese's Pieces, everybody bought it because that's what E.T. liked. Yeah. So that can make a big difference with the success of a product. And I can guarantee you that, Apple, Macintosh has been in a slump, and I don't know if they're going to continue to go down, but I guarantee you that they were stabilized a little bit by Mission Impossible with the advertising, because it's very, very powerful. So that would be the product placement when you see a product in the film. Okay. Also, too, if you do a low-budget film, there's no reason why you can't go to a local Coca-Cola dealer and say, look, we're doing a low-budget film. I want to get free Coke for my film. And I've done it. I did it up in Canada. I went to a local dealer, and he provided us with not just Coca-Cola, but all their other products as well. Whether it be potato chips or iced teas, etc. And all you do is you show it on camera, and you give them a credit at the end of the film. And it's amazing what people will donate, or how people will get involved if you promise to give them a credit. So. You can't get a Ferrari for free or something like that on a low budget for credit. But maybe for a big film you can. Okay. Insurance, I think I'll wait to cover that because that goes into a little bit more detail, and payroll and releases. So why don't we pick that up after, we'll just break for 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll pick it up. Okay? See if there's anybody in the hallway here. Just for writing or whatever, you can't cover everything in 3 hours, but I'm hoping that I can cover enough so that you can all understand the certain categories, and any important questions do get answered. Okay? So, and that would be with any 3-hour course. So if everybody understands. I want to pass this out just so I can get some names and addresses and stuff in case there's some things I sometimes send to people in the future, whether I'm doing a longer class or if I'm having a screening or if I come out to San Diego, maybe I'll need to hire some people. So I'll start this here. Well, I live in Los Angeles. I've been there for 15 years, originally from Canada, Eastern Canada. I'll give just a brief background on myself because I think I sort of went past that. When I was 12 years old, I had a TV show in Canada called Film Fun, and I was the host of the show. And the show was all about making movies, Super 8 movies. And then at the age of 15, I did my first network TV commercial. And then at 17, I did my first TV movie. And then I moved out to the States to go to the American Film Institute as what they call a director fellow. Since then, I've done 4 feature films. 3 of them have been independent that my company has done, that I've produced, directed, and either written or co-written. I did do a film for Paramount Pictures called Undershorts, a Brief Movie, which was sort of in the vein of Hollywood Shuffle and Kentucky Fried Movie. And we're hoping that gets released soon, but it stars Linda Blair and Gallagher in it right now. So, yeah, and I've done some television, Tales from the Dark Side, if anybody used to watch that. I also used to be the resident filmmaker on a show called TV Bloopers and Practical Jokes with Dick Clark and Ed McMahon. I used to do the comedy shorts, and probably my most famous one was a retelling of the story of the Frog Prince, where the princess kisses the frog and it turned into Prince, the rock star, instead. And then I did one on the Michael Jackson Pepsi commercial, where little kid shakes up the canned drink and it explodes in Michael's face, and then they have to carry him off. Then I also did them for a show called Foul Ups, Bleeps, and Blunders with Don Rickles and Steve Lawrence, and a variety of other syndicated shows, HBO, etc. I've done documentaries. I did a documentary on a movie called Slapstick with Jerry Lewis and Madeline Kahn and Jim Backus and Marty Feldman. This is probably about 13 years ago. Some music videos. Probably my most famous music video was the Hands Across America music video with Barbra Streisand and Drew Barrymore. And I think that's it. Did I forget anything? I'm trying to cover this quickly because just so you guys have an idea of a little bit of my background. That should do it for now. Okay. Yes.
What's the percentage of 35 millimeter film to 16 millimeter film that you've been using?
Oh, as far as what I like to use? It all depends on what the budget is. I would say, well, Turn of the Blade was done on 35 because I got a real good deal on the film stock. And we shot very little film. I did only maybe 2 or 3 takes, as opposed to, some directors do 7 or 8 takes. If it's a big budget film, sometimes they'll do 20 or 30 takes per shot, per scene. The random factor was done, actually, Dragon Fury 2, this was shot in 16. And it came out pretty good, and we used a company, I believe they were called Laser Pacific in Los Angeles, and I was very, very pleased with how that came out. So it all depends. I mean, I would prefer 35, but if it's just going to videotape, then it really is not worth the expense to spend more.
When we're talking about product placement,
Yes.
is there a sort of clearinghouse people that you can call up?
Yes, there are companies that do that now. I know there are in Los Angeles, and there may be here as well. I'm trying to think who you would contact to find out about that. I think if you made, a number of calls asking around, like some production companies, that they would know. Was there saying that you could find anything out within 3 phone calls or something? Call somebody, they call somebody, and okay. Okay, we were at insurance. Okay, probably the most important insurance I think most people know what workman's comp is, because that's usually with any business, right? That just covers the worker. E&O insurance, that stands for errors and omissions, and that's usually acquired after you shoot the film. Errors and omissions covers you for, if you'll notice, you'll probably have noticed at the end of a film there's a disclaimer saying the persons in this film are fictitious. Any reality or any comparisons or any similarities, etc., is purely coincidental. That's part of what E&O is all about. It's like if somebody calls you up and says, hey, you were portraying me in that film, or that's the name of my company, or that was me on camera, or something, anything to do with somebody saying, or it could even cover someone saying, I wrote that script, or that's my story. So that just sort of covers you later. Now, going into E&O insurance, when you have a company, insurance company, they want to read the script and make sure that you don't have reference to something in there that's going to, that's going to put up a red flag. For example, I had a character in Turn of the Blade who had his name was Sam Payton, and he had a camera company. He had a still photographer's business, and I wanted to call it Peyton Place. But I didn't want to take that chance because there was a Peyton Place, and it wasn't worth it to take a chance with somebody suing me for that. So that's part of the E&O. Cast insurance is just to cover, your cast members if somebody gets sick, or if you have to replace an actor, and that can be a problem because you may have to shoot another week or 2. Now, famous story with Back to the Future. I actually apprenticed on Back to the Future, the first one in 1983, 84, and Eric Stoltz originally played the part of Marty McFly, the part that Michael J. Fox eventually went on to play. And I believe they had shot about 5 or 6 weeks with Eric before they decided to replace him. And I was on the set one day where it was Eric doing the scene, and then the next night it was Michael J. Fox doing the same scene. So their insurance, I'm sure, covered, if not, part of it, if not all of that replacement, if they gave a, good reason why they had to do that. Your crew equipment or your crew insurance covers, crew people. At sort of, I guess, spills over a little bit into workman's comp. And then your equipment insurance. Usually when you rent insurance or rent equipment, you need insurance. It's usually like $1 million. Liability, $1 million equipment coverage, and just because it's $1 million doesn't mean your insurance is going to be real expensive. The average package that covers cast, crew, workmen's, and equipment and liability is usually around could be as low as $1,500, could be as high as $5,000. Average is about $2,500. Yeah. No, for the whole shoot. Yeah. Yes.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I was wondering, since we're running out of time, if maybe the remainder of the time we could kind of focus on like the bare minimums of what we need to do.
Right,
as far as
right.
Like, if we're going to go and put a film together, because we spent this time on merchandising and product placement, but that's like if you already have a film, you're already established.
Right, right. Okay. Well, what I'm going to go after we finish with pre, I'm going to cover very quickly on the production because I think a lot of people want to know about distribution here. Is that correct? People want to. I think what I'll do is I'll cover the distribution and then we can go back and cover stuff. And we're real close to that right now because we've only got yeah. Okay. So payroll, I won't go into detail on that. Payroll, it works pretty much like it works with any kind of company or job. So you put people on payroll, and that usually covers your workman's comp and other things. Releases, that's just contracts when you get your locations. You want to have a contract for pretty much everything that you do when you have an agreement with somebody or a deal with somebody. If you're going to shoot on a location, make sure that you have it in writing. That you have permission to use a location. If there's a charge for it, that's got to be in writing. And you got to be real careful because on my Paramount film, we had a laundromat that we were using, and the guy no problem. It was like $1,000, and and we even had it in writing. But then we show up on the set, and then the owner of the shopping mall came in and said we had to pay him $5,000. So we didn't cover ourselves on that. So it was partially our fault as well. Okay, I'm going to just read these and briefly go over these because then we're going to get into post-production and distribution. Okay, is there anything on here that anybody wants to go back and cover in detail regarding camera setups? We talked about script continuity. Timing and pacing is more with the acting and the direction. Camera movements we talked a little bit about with dolly and Steadicam. Symbolism is more in the direction. Acting techniques, the type of shots, it's pretty straightforward. You know, the close-ups, the medium, wide shots. Keeping on schedule and Murphy's Law. Murphy's Law is, I mentioned earlier, the better plan, the better planned you are, the less can happen. But Murphy's Law always does happen. So you should always try and have a plan A and a plan B. Sometimes a plan C, and D, and E. Okay. If there's nothing there immediate you guys want to talk about, we'll go ahead to the post because we're getting close over to the distribution. Oops. Okay, editing. Right now, nonlinear is very big these days. Nonlinear is where it's almost like a puzzle. It's like you can take your pieces and shuffle them around and put them in any order, and it's very, very quick. And what nonlinear has replaced is linear editing. Linear editing is when you've got your video, let's say you've got something on your VCR and you want to cut things together, you've got to cut it in order. You can't actually cut up the actual videotape and organize it. And I guess the simplest way to explain that is, let's say you tell a story with still pictures, okay? You can move those still pictures around in any order you want. It's kind of the same thing with nonlinear editing. It takes all those video scenes or those film scenes and puts them into the computer, and you can juggle them around and edit your scenes that way. And it's much quicker. And they do that for, I would say, 95% of feature films now use nonlinear. Sound effects, that's just adding sound effects to the film. A lot of times, I would say that more than 60% of the sound, if not more, is added. Maybe even 80% is added to the film. Almost every sound is replaced except for the dialogue, and the dialogue is enhanced. That goes on to Foley and ambience. Foley is footsteps, punches, sounds of things like somebody putting a glass down on a table, rustling of clothing, etc. And that is, you may have seen this on TV and behind the scenes, where you'll see they're projecting the movie, and you'll have 2 or 3 people called Foley artists. They'll be walking around. You'll see some guy wearing high heels, imitating the lady walking down the street. And they'll have what's called Foley pits, which it's in the studio, but there's these little pits, and one has gravel, one has sand, one has concrete, and then they just step over to that pit and they like walk on the spot like that. And you can get very creative when you're doing your Foley. M&E, that comes in with your distribution for foreign. M&E stands for music and effects. Now what happens is your music and effects translate to any language, obviously. Okay, your sound effects sound the same to people that speak Japanese or French. And so you have separate tracks that you make with your music and effects, and your dialogue tracks are put onto separate tracks, so that what happens is when you sell the film foreign, they take the dialogue tracks away, so all they hear is the music and the sound effects, and they replace it with their language. Dialogue cutting, that's just pretty much what I just talked about. You're just working on the dialogue and you're cutting it. A lot of times the actor's dialogue, if you've got 3 actors, they all may be on separate tracks, but eventually the dialogue tracks all go into one track. Your music, cue sheets, songs, etc. Cue sheets is just a list from the composer of when each cue starts, so that if they're going to get royalties on a song, etc., that can be sent to the appropriate unions. Your final mix, again, that's the music and effects tracks. That's just where, if you're doing domestic, which means, for the English language, US and Canada, where you mix your dialogue with your effects and your music, sound effects and music, so it all sounds great. Titles and credits, pretty straightforward. You organize your titles and make sure you give everybody credit where credit's due. Technical considerations, I have D2, nonlinear, linear. We talked about linear and nonlinear. D2 is just another form of video. If you're going to video or television, D2 is digital. And as I'm sure you're all aware, the digital domain is becoming the new technology here. Because digital is numbers. It's 0, 1, 0, 1. It's kind of like your computer. When you make a copy of a computer program, it's just as good as the original. And that's pretty much what digital is. Okay. Now we're on to distribution. Yeah, we're doing good here, guys. Okay. Distribution is very, very important because without distribution, you could have, you pretty much have wasted your time making a movie unless you just want to entertain people and not make money. I got into distribution probably about 3 or 4 years ago, and I have learned so much in the last few years. The hardest markets for distribution, or the hardest market for distribution, is the United States. Okay? Now, do not be discouraged by that, because you could make a film that can be very, very successful and could make a good amount of money and not even sell it to the United States. Okay? I have done several films that have done quite well, and some of these have not sold to the U.S. For example, we are talking foreign distribution. Now, there are over 300 active companies that buy feature films and television product. You can get a list. Again, this can be through Samuel French. There may be other lists, directories, but they are what you call foreign distributors. And all they do, they are actively looking for low-budget films. And the reason why they're looking is because there's such a market right now, especially with television product, whether it be TV, we'll call it a TV movie as opposed to a series. They're looking for product. A lot of times foreign distributors don't put up an advance. But if the film is produced well, even if there's no names in it, there's a very good chance that you will make your money back and make a profit for the investors. You can make a low-budget film for $50,000 to $100,000 if it looks technically acceptable. And like I said, it doesn't have to look like a major studio picture, but if it's got a good script, you could realistically, you could make 5 to 10 times your investor's money back. Because what happens is, each country, for example, let's say the United States, there are different reps from the United States that can buy your film and sell it to television, sell it to home video, sell it to the airlines, sell it to the hotels, to the pay television. Each country has different reps and different distribution companies within each country that could buy your film and sell it. So what happens is, Japan could buy your film, Korea could buy your film, Italy could buy your film. Each country is a separate customer. Okay, so you have to look at it like that. So if there's over 300 active countries, and there may be more, your film could realistically, if it's a good film, sell to every single country.
When you sell to a country like that, would they be responsible for dubbing the new voices and everything?
Yes, they do all that. The only ones that don't do that, I think, is possibly French Canada, from what I know. Now, you're saying, okay, well, how do I sell my film to Japan and Italy and all this stuff? Okay, I couldn't do it myself either. What you do is, once you find these foreign distributors, okay, now foreign distributor doesn't mean they're somewhere out, in a foreign country. The foreign distributors are here, in the States. The majority of them are in Los Angeles, but you don't have to be in LA. I mean, you can mail them your cassette because it's based on the cassette. It's not based, it's not based on meeting you. And they look at the final product. Yes?
Why is distribution so difficult in the United States if films are made here? Why is it so hard? Is it because of the big studios?
It's because of the names. That's what it is. Because, unfortunately, the market here in the United States is, if there's not a name in the film, it's very hard to sell.
Well, how are they selling the foreign films? I mean, there's Australian films that are coming here that are very good.
Exactly,
and they're
exactly.
selling really well.
That's a very good question. It's a lot tougher here if you have a really, really good script, but there's a lot of films that are more commercial, as opposed. The artsy films seem to be doing, better. But if it's a really well executed film, then there's a good chance of that. But a lot of the studios don't want to take a chance.
How about the indie route, like say Miramax or Gramercy, for example?
Well, yeah, Miramax now is not as independent as they used to be. They're now owned by Disney. There's now mouse ears above their name, and they still say they're independent, and it's like, yeah, but they got Disney behind them, and Disney's not independent. Well, they have the money, they have the clout to push stuff like that. And again, if it's controversial, and if you have something controversial, you've got a better chance of getting it here in the States, you know. But unfortunately, it's a lot harder because the studios don't want to take a chance as much if there's no names in it. That's why if you can get a name, a celebrity, that's going to help sell it. Because a lot of times the studios will say, well, who's in it? They don't even ask you what the story is about first. They say, who's in it first? The reason why it's easier to sell in the foreign markets is because it's not as important to them if it's a smaller film, whether there's a name in it or not, because they just need product, period. And because I guess there's not as many stars in their countries or whatever, they're just willing to see, you know, product that comes from, I guess the star is probably because it's come from the States, because it's come from Hollywood. But now if you have a name and it goes foreign, that can help too. I mean, you know, Stallone and Schwarzenegger, they're hot overseas, Tom Cruise, people like that. But that's why there's also a lot of junk that comes out of the film, you know, that goes out to the foreign markets too, because people are they know there's markets out there. They know that there's all these new TV stations going up and these satellite dishes and pay TV, and they've got to fill the time. They've got to buy product. Now, each country may not pay a lot of money. You can get as low as $1,500 per country, or you can get as high as $150,000 or more per country. Certain countries pay a certain amount of money. For example, we sold Turn of the Blade to Korea, and we got $65,000 just for Korea. And this was a film with no names. No names. It was a very commercial story as far as it was sort of a cross between Jagged Edge and Fatal Attraction, but there was nothing artsy about it. There was nothing. It was more like a TV movie you'd see on maybe the USA Network, something like that, you know, or the Random Factor, something you'd see on, you know, maybe the Sci-Fi Channel. So it depends on what kind of product they're looking for. Now, even if you sold to every country or every other country for a few $1,000s, that can add up to anywhere from $500,000 up, okay? And you got your budget back right there. So that's the nice thing, is that each country is a separate client, okay?
Do they have I know I've been to France for this thing called Vita, which is a music festival.
Right.
Do they have a place where all these distributors go similarly to
Yes,
movies?
absolutely, and that's this part right here.
Okay.
Distribution markets, I can talk about that. There is AFM, which is the American Film, stands for the American Film Market. Okay. Now, these are, I guess this is the heart of foreign distribution right here, what I'm going to talk about. Okay. The American Film Market is in Los Angeles. It's once a year. It's usually the end of March, beginning of February. It lasts approximately 10 days. Okay. I'll go into detail soon on what each one is. The Cannes Film Festival, I'm sure everybody's heard about Cannes. That takes place in France, in Cannes. That usually is mid to late May, around May 18th, May 20th. And MIFED, which is in Italy, and that's in Milan. Okay. Well, these are all international markets where all the foreign distributors go. They set up offices in the suites. They usually, you know, close the hotels down just for the distributors, or they move all the, you know, as far as like the Loews Hotel, for example, is where the American Film Market is in Los Angeles, and they don't have any people staying there other than the foreign distributors. Okay, so what happens is the foreign distributors set up in hotels, either at the AFM in Los Angeles, or Cannes in France, or MIFED in Italy. And then buyers from all over the world go to these markets. And they usually go to all three. And what happens is buyers go, and it's just like a convention. It's like a convention. It's like a buyer's convention. There could be 20 or 100 reps from each country, from different companies within each country that buy films. That's why there's competition. See, that's why it's good, because You don't just have one guy from one company in Japan or from Italy or Korea or whatever going in there and they got to go with that deal. They could have 30 people from Japanese companies saying we want this movie, and they take the best deal. Okay. So what happens is these people, I've been to each of these markets, so I can speak from experience. You see all these people from all over the world. People, half of them don't even speak English. More than half don't speak English, and they walk in, their briefcases and their three-piece suits. They sit down, and the foreign distributors show trailers. Okay, they show it can be 2 minutes, 3 minutes of each film that they represent, and each foreign distributor could have 5 films that they're selling, 10 films. The average distributor seems to have anywhere between 15 and 30. 30 is a lot. And what they do is they have a distributor's reel, a foreign distributor's reel. These buyers go in, they sit down in front of the TV set, and they watch 2 or 3 minutes from each film, and then they talk among themselves, and then they say, okay, we want this film, and this film. Now, what's interesting is a lot of times they buy the film just based on the trailer. They don't even watch the film. Now, if they're talking more money, if they're talking more than maybe $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, okay, let's say it's an offer. I've had one of my films sell for up to $150,000, one market. Now, with that market, it was based on seeing the trailer, but they wanted to see the film, and the deal was not locked in until they saw the film. So what's really important is your trailer. Just like when you turn the TV on and there's a 30-second commercial for a movie, yours is like a 2-3 minute commercial for your movie. The better your trailer is, the better your chances of a sale. And you might make a sale just based on your trailer. Because these buyers, they go in, they've only got a certain amount of time, they want to see a tease. If they like what they see, they'll either ask to see more or they'll buy it right on the spot. Okay? So without these markets, these 3 markets, foreign films would not be sold. Or independent films would not be sold other than, in their where they were originally made. Let's say if there were not the foreign markets, then if I made a film here, I would only be able to sell it in the States, maybe in Canada. I wouldn't know how to do it overseas. Now, when it's done overseas, the foreign distributor takes care of the delivery items. Okay, what they do is you do a delivery letter with them so that they have access to the lab where your film is, so they can cut copies of it. Usually, it's videotape.
So what you were saying is we need to give our film to a distributor, and then they go to this place.
Right. Yeah, you can't sell it yourself. You do a deal with the foreign distributor. If you go there, nobody knows who you are. But if you have a foreign distributor that has a reputation there, I'm trying to think. The biggest foreign distributor, I think 20th Century Fox has a foreign distribution outlet. But they're smaller companies.
So you have to find somebody in LA.
Yeah, and there's directories on it, and it says if they do foreign films. And they look at films all the time. I mean, they have piles of scripts, piles of tapes. And if it's good, if it shows any potential of sale, it's not that hard to get a foreign distributor. It really isn't. Yes.
So do you negotiate with the foreign distributor a fee or a percentage?
Yes. The standard fee is about 25. They take 25%, leaving you obviously the 75%, which is not a bad deal. Yeah, but it's not bad. I mean, if you the only thing that you've got to watch out for is the expenses that they take off the top, and you've got to get that in writing. Because I've had films go to foreign distributors, and a lot of the expenses were absorbed in there, and it may have taken a year before I saw anything. So one of the expenses is a trailer. Okay, if you don't have a trailer, they will offer to make a trailer for you, and they are experienced at making trailers. They know what sells. You have to be careful, though, that they don't... Now, that's the other thing, too, is if you have a reputable foreign distributor, and they are real, they will not charge you a cent if they want your film. They will put the money up. They're not, there's something fishy. If they are really, if they're up and they're a real distributor and they want your picture, either they'll offer you a little bit of money up front. Not a lot of them do it unless they really, really want that picture and they really think it's commercial. Or they'll do a deal with you and they'll put up whatever the expenses are. What you have to do, though, is you have got to agree to what those expenses are. Now, most of these, I'm telling you what the standard expenses are. Usually you can negotiate them to an extent, but if they give you the deal that I'm telling you, this is standard and it's not out of the ordinary. It's usually 25% that they take, leaving you 75. For the first year, a lot of them charge, and this is where it gets expensive, they charge $10,000 on top of that per market for the first 3 premier markets. So for the first AFM, the first Cannes, and the first MIFED. After that, goes into the second year, they don't charge you that. So what they're really doing is they're getting 25% plus $30,000 on top of that, okay? A trailer, they can charge you anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000. My average trailer has cost about $5,500, and it was worth it, okay? Don't let them charge you too much, though. The other costs might be some advertising, full-page advertising. Sometimes they put full-page ads. I have an example. For example, with Turn of the Blade, let's see if I have a full-page ad of that. Okay, I don't think I have Turn of the Blade, but here's one for the random factor. This was in the Holly Reporter. They have an American Film Market edition, and that's usually they advertise in the Hollywood Reporter and Variety. Those are the 2 major ones that they advertise in for the foreign markets. And the ads can be $1,000, it can be $10,000, depending, what kind of ad it is. Usually you can share it with someone else who has a film. So if it's 2 films, you pay half. If it's 4 films, you pay a quarter of that. Okay. All right, so you just have to make sure you get everything in writing and make sure that you know what the expenses are off the top with the foreign distributor. Usually the monies are paid for in US dollars, and they worry about that. They do all the delivery. As I was mentioning earlier, wherever your film is, whatever lab it's in or video facility, you give them permission to have access. They're like a signatory where they can order copies to, once they make the sales. Okay, they don't own the film, they just own the rights to distribute it foreign. And you can also, what I did on one of my films was, if the distributor, if I wasn't happy with what they did, I put a clause in my contract stating that if they didn't make a minimum of $400,000 in sales, that the contract was null and void and that I could go to another distributor. And thankfully, my distributor did more than $400,000 in sales, and I was happy, and they were happy, and I'm sticking with them. So,
do you present them with a contract, or do they usually have a contract?
They usually present you with a contract, and then they present it to you, and then you might have your attorney look it over, and you can negotiate, back and forth. Okay. I just want to make sure I haven't forgotten anything on that. Okay.
How would you become a distributor? I mean, do these people have a background in film, or do they just decide?
So a lot of them know nothing about making films. Exactly. Yeah, it's just some of them were agents, or a lot of them were attorneys. Actually, I found a lot of them have a legal background, and some of them were crooks. But so you have to be careful. I mean, I've been fortunate. I've dealt with some good distributors, but usually they do get a reputation though, and that's why you can't sell your film yourself, because when the buyers are out there looking for product, they go to the companies that they've dealt with before, and that's the nice thing about it is if if they've dealt with a company before, they have a reputation. And even if their product is not the best, they'll still go to them before they go to somebody that they don't know. And that's the other nice thing is that the foreign distributor usually knows if someone buys the film, they know if they're going to pay or not, if they're going to, honor the contract. So that's kind of nice to know that as well. Okay. Any other questions so far about the?
When was the dates on the AFM and the MIFED?
AFM is the end of March, beginning of February, for about 10 days. That's in Los Angeles.
End of March, beginning of February?
Yeah.
End of February, beginning of March?
I mean, sorry, yes, sorry. And MIFED is October, I think it's around October 12th.
Where's MIFED?
MIFED is in Italy. It's in Milan. Yeah. Yeah, I got confused because the AFM was in, I think it was the beginning of March one year, and it was the beginning of February. Yeah. So this past year it was the latter.
Where's the AFM?
That's at the Loews Hotel in Santa Monica in Los Angeles. Yes.
Do you ever see distributors at film festivals? I mean, like Sundance and some of the other women film festivals?
Yes and no. I have actually not been to Sundance yet. I would like to go, but I've sort of been waiting to make a picture that's appropriate for it. I know that a lot of the domestic distributors do fly around there. I mean, I know that there's reps from most of the studios, from the major studios, including Miramax, New Line, Fine Line. So as far as domestic, Sundance is real good for that. I don't know whether the foreign people hang out there too much, because I can't speak from experience on that. But if you have a film that you feel could be commercial in the States, then it's definitely worthy of taking it to Sundance. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Sundance, that was set up by Robert Redford, and it originally sort of put independent films on the map now, and a lot of films that are going through there now are a little bit above the independent, but it's sort of more of the sort of the offbeat, artsy, or very controversial films that seem to get discovered there. And agents are always looking for talent there as well. Okay, doing the next deal. Well, that goes back to the pre-sales and letters of interest. When it says letters of interest, if you do have somebody, a celebrity or a name, that wants to or has agreed to be a part of your project, get a letter from them. It can be a very simple letter just showing that you know them. It could be something like, for example, I had one from Linda Blair for a project, and it just said pretty much that she knew she knew me, she had worked with me before, that she would be interested in this project, of course depending on salary and her availability. So it can be a non-committal letter, but the fact is if you have any kind of letter to you from that star or celebrity, it gives you a little bit more credibility. It doesn't mean they're going to do it necessarily, but at least it shows you know them, and that you go to investors, they can they know you're not lying. So okay. Distribution materials, I talked a little bit about the trailer. Photos, the most important thing that I have actually neglected in the past and know not to do now, and that is have a still photographer. Even if it's not a professional photographer, it's better than nothing, to take as many stills as possible, because those stills will be used in the publicity materials for your film. They'll be needed for the poster, they'll be needed for the advertising, and I really lacked that in Turn of the Blade. As a matter of fact, because I didn't have a lot of photographs taken on this film, I actually had to pull stills off the film via video, and the quality was not that great. So it would have been a lot easier if I had a photographer on set taking the pictures. But I learned that on my next ones. I think we probably had 1,000 taken on Random Factor, and probably close to that on Dragon Fury. But they're often used. They can be used in the back also. For some of the artwork. And this just explains what the film is. This is called a one sheet, and this is if you go to one of the film markets, you'll see these flying around all over the place. These are like mini posters at any of the film markets. Any of the film markets, the AFM.
I thought that only distributors could go there.
Right, but I'm saying if you go to one, I was saying if you were looking what was happening, you'd see these floating all over the place. Okay.
But you can't get in.
Well, you can go into the lobby of the Loews Hotel, and you could try and get in if you fly over to Italy, but it's expensive to go there and find out they won't let you in. You have to have badges. Everybody has badges. It's very tight. They're union organizations. I think you can buy a badge to the AFM for $700. Okay. Some people, if you have a film there, though, I think you can buy a badge for under $200 if you're a producer of one of the films. Okay. One of my producers got me one for the AFM, actually for the other ones too, but for AFM, and I think it was about $200 for it, which was kind of nice. But there's nothing I could really do other than watch. I couldn't sell. I could just observe, and if I ran into somebody that bought, I could say, go up to the suite. But what I meant by is if you were to to be an observer at one of these film markets, you would see these one-sheets flying all over the place, because it's the one-sheet and the trailers that sell your film. And what each buyer does is when they come in and they watch your film, they take one of these, and there'll be a display where if there's 20 films being shown, they'll take 20 of these, or they'll take whichever flyers that they're interested in the films, and they'll take them back. Yeah. I'm sorry? You like that? Thank you. And this actually, I designed this myself actually with another gentleman, Eric Abramson, who helped design this. He was one of the associate producers on it. And the distributors were very pleased. Most of the time, but don't worry, if you haven't designed a poster or you're not sure, most of the time the foreign distributor or the distributor likes to design their own. It was just very rare that they went with mine. They just said they liked the style and they went with it. So don't worry if you don't know what the design is. This one, I don't know if it'll change. I had nothing to do with this one. I don't know how well it's doing for them overseas, but they felt that was commercial. The one for Dragon Fury 2 was based, I think, on one of the, I can't remember the name of it, but it was, does this remind anybody of anything with the, I'm trying to remember the guys, it's on the tip. So a little bit Star Trek, a little bit Star Wars, but it was one of the Time Warrior movies, and it slips my mind right now. And we had Mike Norris in it. This was very low budget. We couldn't afford Chuck Norris, so we got his son Mike. And Mike was a very nice guy. Sometimes foreign markets, a lot of times foreign markets, depending what markets you want to sell to, they like a lot of action because it translates very well, in the foreign territories. They like explosions, and sometimes they like nudity too. But that's tending to change, which is kind of nice. So they're a lot more liberal when it comes to nudity in the foreign markets. So okay, let's. I guess we could start taking some questions now, because I think I've pretty much covered what I wanted to directly say to you guys. Let me go back. Are there any more questions on the distribution? Because we're doing good time here now, so we've got time. Well, again, distribution for music videos, because there actually is an AFM, which stands for the Federation of Musicians or something, or Association of. But music videos there's really not a market for music videos. Again, unless, like I said, you put together a program where it's got half an hour's worth, and then you sell it. Because I did, like I said, I did do a music video, and there really wasn't a market for it. Playboy Channel did not pay us to put on the channel. One thing that we did try doing was we did a behind the scenes where we shot, on video we probably shot about at least 8 hours of behind the scenes, because we had like 40 attractive women that would work for the Playboy Channel. We had the cop cars, and we had some effects, and we had just behind the scenes, and we thought maybe we could put together a half-hour program and market that, but we found that was even a hard sell as well. So again, it all depends, but then maybe, I don't know, see, it's tough. Even when they ran it on MTV Europe, there wasn't any pay for it. Usually the pay comes from if they buy the album, they buy the records. So, that's usually where it comes from.
But if you do have a video album, then where would you take it to sell?
If you had a video, like the whole thing?
Yeah, like we was talking about a lot.
You could take it, well, because it's probably the English language. Mind you, music is still universal, regardless of the language. You could still take it to you could talk to foreign distributors, you can ask them. You could say, I have a half-hour program or an hour program of this.
Because if they wanted to buy time.
Yeah, it could possibly be used for what's called interstitial programming.
Could you spell it?
Interstitial programming. Interstitial programming is, you see a lot of interstitial programming on the pay channels as opposed to the networks. Interstitial programming really means programming that is 1 to maybe 3 minutes in length that fills in gaps between programs. Okay? For example, a lot of the comedy shorts that I sold 10 years ago to HBO were called interstitial programming. They had, hour programs, or they'd have a 58-minute program, and they had no commercials at the time. They still don't have commercials, do they? No. So because they didn't have commercials, their programming didn't exactly fit together without gaps in them. So interstitial programming, they were able to throw a 1 minute or a 2 minute. That's why sometimes you'll see like short films, like student films or short films, in between programming on the pay channels. That's a place where maybe you could sell a music video as an interstitial programming because it's filling a void for them. And that is a possibility. There's a better chance, though, if it's a commercial group, you know, unless they're really, really, really good. Okay.
I was going to ask you about television.
Okay.
In distributing your films in television, how exactly does that work?
Okay.
Because it seems like they do a lot of independent filming on even HBO now.
Right.
And I watched the, what is it, the Women's Channel, which has a lot of really interesting films on that.
Right. So you're talking more the independent pay channels,
Yeah.
pretty much. Yeah. It's very hard to sell to the major networks like ABC and you know NBC. Television is very hard. That's pretty much the reason why I surpassed the television market and started making feature films, because you know you can get your own feature film out. Television, you've got to go through the executives and this. You know, there's so many people. Now, pay TV, it's a lot easier. Something like the Women's Channel would be a lot easier too. If you have a proposal or a finished product, you can submit it to them either directly, or you can find a rep who does that for a living, who has a reputation with them, who can take it to them. And you can often, I'm not sure exactly how to find a rep. You might be able to, some of the foreign distributors actually will spill over into that market too. If you had something for the Women's Network, you could call a foreign distributor and say, do you sell to the domestic pay channels? And if they don't, they'll refer you to somebody who does. But it is a lot easier to sell to pay TV, and there are so many channels coming up now. Like USA Network, if you've got something good, you can just submit it to the acquisitions person. And that's usually the person you put it to the attention of. It's usually they're usually called the VP of Acquisitions or Acquisitions, and they look at all product. And if it's a good product, they'll put it on, you know. And if it's a so-so product and they like it, they'll put it on at 2 o'clock in the morning, you know. But they'll pay you and they'll put it on.
Stuff on TV, and I'm wondering how some of that stuff gets on there.
Oh,
because,
it's
you know,
amazing.
Really, really bad films, and
Yeah.
I'm thinking, I know I can do better
Yep.
than
Yeah,
this.
it's really amazing. I mean, I know people that have done, you know, the sort of typical TNA type thing, you know, where you got the bikini, you know, sort of a little bit less than Baywatch in a sense, you know, showing a little bit more. And you'll get that on the USA Network. You'll get that on some of the other smaller channels, and they'll pay $50,000, $60,000 for 2-3 years.
I watched this film that took place in a car wash, and of course all the women had on like very little.
Bikini Car Wash.
And was that it? Something like that.
Great film.
And they had all those were suds and water.
Yeah.
That was it. And
Yep.
someone paid
Yep.
for this to be
Yeah.
on.
Unfortunately, there is a market for that. You know, it's just it's kind of a shame because there's a lot of films that go out to the foreign markets that are like that, and those sell really, really well because you've got these foreign buyers nodding their heads, going, yeah. Yes.
What was that you said about 3 years paying $56?
Okay. Yeah. When you go to the domestic territories, if you haven't sold it to like one distributor that's going to market it, let's say in the U.S. and represent it for all of U.S., but when you sell it foreign, let's say you sell it to Korea, okay, whoever buys it there, they're going to handle it for home video, for pay TV, for television, for theatrical if it goes that far.
Registered and everything with the Writers Guild to protect yourself. What are the chances of them actually looking at it and looking at it seriously?
Are you talking in script format or in shot format?
Well, I was thinking, like, if there's different methods of getting people's attention and stuff. Because I've met a lot of film people over the years, and everyone seems to have their different method of going about it. But I think one of the major things I'm sure I'm not alone in this,
Right.
with the others here in the room, is how do you get yourself, in the door when you don't have the contacts, you don't have any prior film experience, but maybe you have a vision or you have an idea of how you want to put something together.
Well, an agent helps. An agent helps because an agent has a connection to the production companies. It's very hard to go into the production companies on your own. The main reason is because whether it be a script or a trailer or something, showing part of your product, is the legalities, because studios are afraid of lawsuits. And when something is submitted through an agent, they have, because of the rapport between the agents and the studios, they're protected. They have agreements between themselves. The other thing is now, if you don't have an agent, an attorney is also acceptable, especially for a literary piece of material. If you have an attorney submit something to a studio, that usually will suffice. And I've rarely heard of a studio returning a script if it's been sent via an attorney.
Could you give us a list of names of people
That look at stuff?
attorneys
Attorney, it can be your attorney here. It can be an attorney you contact here.
are connected?
It doesn't even have to be connected attorneys, because I could pick up the phone in LA and just any attorney. If I run into someone who tells me they're an attorney, I could ask them to submit something, as long as they are registered with the bar. They don't even have to be, I think, an entertainment attorney. They can be any kind of attorney, because it's a legal connection between them and the studio.
Well, I mean, so what, they just sort of care of them, they're sending the
Right.
script?
It's just like an agent. It would say, it'd be a cover sheet, very brief, cover letter saying, please find enclosed the following script, tape, product reel, etc., from my client, and we look forward to your comments. If there's interest, please contact us. You see, that way it's done legally, so there's proof that the attorney sent it legally, proof the studio got it legally, and it's done in proper channels, rather than somebody coming out of Iowa and trying to sue Spielberg's Amblin company saying, hey, I wrote Twister. Well, what's the connection there? Okay, if they can present a legal letter from their attorney who sent it, then they may have a case there.
Is
You
that
see.
what happened with, that movie with, the guy, the Gumby guy?
Coming to America?
Yeah, Coming to America.
Oh, Eddie Murphy. Oh, the
Yeah,
Gumby guy, Eddie Murphy.
and what's his name?
Ark Buchwald, yeah.
That actually wasn't a plagiarism suit. It was actually
Oh,
a breach of
plagiarism.
it was a breach of contract suit.
Oh, okay.
There's a thick book out there, but it's really an entertaining read.
Yeah.
It's called Fatal Subtraction.
Mm-hmm,
And it's a story about how the entertainment industry does business. And
Yes.
what happened was Art Buchwald had a contract with the studio already that if they made a film based on his idea, he'd get a percentage of the profits. He submitted the idea to them. He decided that he was going to submit this idea to them. And so it wasn't handled at all like a plagiarism suit. It was handled like a breach of contract suit.
And they're saying the movie didn't make money. Now, for example, Waterworld will probably, and it's doing much better than they thought it was going to do, and it could make 150, maybe 200, and it may never see a profit. That's why you have to be very careful with creative bookkeeping when you do a deal with somebody. Try and get gross as opposed to net. It's harder to get, of course, to get gross unless you've got some, some power in the industry.
How can you make a film and everybody's going to see it and it makes no money?
Exactly. That's exactly what people say.
It goes into great detail
It's
on
called,
that
what
very
is it called
subject.
again? Fatal?
Fatal
Subtraction. Yes, what they do is they write off everything. I mean, for example, with Eddie Murphy, I think his expenses alone were, in the hundreds of thousands just for him and his entourage, to work on the shoot. And then you've got, the studio fees, and then you've got any of the other points maybe before your points. So it can be, you got to be really careful, because chances are, try and get as much as you can up front, or get a gross deal as opposed to a net, because with a net deal, unless you're dealing with real honest, accountants, et cetera, at studios, it's real tough to see anything. So, because they can write off, I don't know, the president had someone walk his dog the other day. They wrote that off, So you got to be careful with it. That's why a lot of these movies don't make money, which is a shame. I think Tom Cruise, for example, he produced the Mission Impossible with his partner, and he deferred himself his salary rather than taking 10 or 20 million up front. I think he did it for scale, which is next to nothing. But he was smart, because I think he cut himself in for the profits, and because he's working, it's his company, he's working with the studio. He probably is going to make anywhere from 50 mil up from this movie because of that, because he got it on the gross end, not on the net end. there's a story, a friend of mine worked with Harrison Ford on, I think it was Clear and Present Danger, and he had a deal with them in the back end on the gross points. And I think it was the day after it opened, the studio sent a check to him for $10 million right after it opened. And I don't think they'd even gotten into their profit yet, but they did it because they knew they were going to, and also they wanted him to do the sequels. So they wanted to keep him happy. And he's a very nice man. I actually have, I met him briefly, but I know people that have worked with him, and some of the biggest stars are some of the nicest people. And it's some of the lower, the lower celebrities that are not as nice, because they just tend to be a little bit more arrogant. So it's kind of nice to know that Dustin Hoffman is very nice man, very talented actor. Okay, anything else with that? There might be more questions. Jump in, but we're doing good time here. Okay, I'm going to go back a little bit to the writing, because I know some of you want to know a little bit about that. This is what I call my nonlinear writing technique. Now, this is actually an example from a program, so it has nothing to do, it's got my name in there, it even spells it right, but it has nothing to do with me. I didn't write this. This is just a sample. This one is, yes. But I'm sure you can probably get it for the IBM as well.
What's it called?
This is a program called 3x5, and it's based on 3x5 index cards. But you can do this. As a matter of fact, it's almost easier to not do it with a computer. I only did it with a computer because I travel a lot, and I put it in my PowerBook or whatever, and I've gotten used to it. But you could pick up a pack of 3x5 index cards, and what this is there's different ways to go about working on this, but when you've got your story, you're trying to formulate your story idea. This usually comes before you've written the script. Okay, you get an idea for a story, and you might be driving in the car, walking down the street, or anywhere, and an idea comes to you, or a good idea for a scene comes to you, but you don't know where it's going to go in the movie, in your story. So what you do is you write it down on a separate card. Okay, because a lot of times people get ideas and they go, well, I don't have the beginning, I don't have the end, I don't have the middle, so I'm not even going to write this down because I don't know where it's going to go. And when I get to that point, I'll put it in. But then you forget.
Yeah.
And what you find out is, if you keep doing this, you could write 2-3 cards a day, you could write 20 cards a day. Eventually, you're going to start formulating your story and not even knowing it. And then what you do is you flip through the cards, almost like, that's the index cards were used for studying math or tests or whatever. Same kind of thing. You flip through it, and you start to get ideas for your story, and then what will happen is other cards will trigger other ideas. And because I call it nonlinear writing, that idea will come in between another idea. Like I might get an idea that works great in between being in the car and going to the house. Maybe they stop at a convenience store and there's a robbery, and then that's where he finds out that it was his ex-wife that was behind the robbery, or something like that. So you keep adding things, and you'll find that your story in point form will start to tell itself. Okay? Then when you get comfortable that you've got a story, then you can start turning each of these cards, expanding them, and turning them into a screenplay. Okay? Now, like I said, the book, How to Write a Movie in 21 Days by Vicki King is an excellent book because it teaches heart.